Another thing I'm feeling happy about is this gardening presentation, which we've been talking about for a while, but I kept moving it and things kept happening. So I apologize about that, but it is happening today, and I can't wait. And I will confess that I tried to have a garden in our backyard, and it failed miserably. People would ask, "Oh, Joe, didn't you do a garden? Didn't you have plants back there?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, they're not there anymore." That'd be my answer. They're not there anymore. I don't know. Truth is that they died a gruesome death. They were like leaning. They were getting, it was just terrible. It was so sad. And there was this big, what is it? What's that called? PVC pipe construction that I put up for tomatoes and all this stuff. And it just looked like a monstrosity at the end. It was terrible. So we took it all down, and now it just looks like a lawn. Nothing ever happened there. You will never know. But I'm looking forward to hearing real insider information from an expert. And a few weeks ago we were talking about having mentors, and I was thinking about it because, you can know anything if you want to Google it, right? You can research it as much as you want. You can know anything. There was a funny comic cartoon. The wife is complaining to the husband, "Hey, the sink is broken," and he says, "Oh, I know how to fix it." And she's like, "Do you know, or do you Google know?" It was good. I was like, yeah, I Google know a lot of stuff. And so that there's a gray area between knowing it on paper and actually doing it and having a dynamic, a touch and an experience with it. It's different. And I heard a philosopher on the radio yesterday who said there's no amount of studying Newton's law of motion that has ever put a billiard ball into motion. There's no amount of studying that has ever put one single billiard ball into motion. It actually takes the act of pushing the ball. That's a whole different topic, actually, if you think about it. And in the world of music, this makes a lot of sense to me because some of my favorite musicians don't know what the heck they are doing. Some of these guys who wrote the best songs we have ever heard have only learned 3 or 4 chords. And the knowledge doesn't really it doesn't indicate how amazing they are going to be. And actually, my mom had a roommate in seminary, I believed, and her name was Pepper, and she wrote songs that were beautiful songs, and I've heard a lot of them as a kid, and it was amazing. My mom showed me the sheet music, the charts, the words, and the chords, and it was unlike any music I have ever seen in my life, because above the words, above the lyrics, were not chords. They were shapes: triangle, square, star. She didn't know the names of the chords. She just picked them up and put her hands on the guitar and wrote legitimately beautiful songs, but did not know a single name of a single chord. So it shows you how effective you can be if you put your will to it. The knowledge is not necessary sometimes. It can help, but it's not necessary. And so I liken to take this kind of platform or this opportunity today to focus on this idea of learning the spirit of something, learning the heart of something, and how that is different from learning the brain of it, learning with the heart. And I wanted to actually take there was so much that kept coming up in my mind that I wanted to take the next few Sundays to talk about this. How do you learn with your heart? And that's a very interesting topic. And when you learn with your brain, you start out with a test score, and then the next year you test higher, and you can mark your progress. Learning with the heart is a much different and actually harder to see topic. So I want to take the next few weeks, maybe 1 or 2 more than this, to talk about how to learn with the heart. And I can only share what I've kind of worked through in my own life, my own markers, my own test scores, as you will, things I didn't used to have patience for that I do have patience for now. Things like that. People that I couldn't love before and love a little more now. There's ways to mark your score and see your progress. And I can pass on the little crumbs of experience that I have in this. And I think being a musician might have helped because it kind of always brought me back to where my feelings and my spirit or my emotions were really at. But I wanted to start today with looking at the difference between the spirit of something and the letter or the written form, because a lot of what we are seeing today is a written information. You Google search it, you read articles. And even when you study the Word of God, you're going to read a lot of it. And of course, we know that in the beginning, there was the Word and God was the Word, right? But how do we make the Word translate into a lesson for the heart instead of just a lesson for the mind? Because a lot of people think Bible is just a bunch of stories or a Bible is just a historical text. Something I learned recently was actually there were lots of writings at the time of the same time as the people writing the Bible. Same time period, people were also writing other historical accounts, and it didn't make it into the Bible. And one of the main reasons is it would have to be considered an inspired writing to make it into the Bible. And I think this is very important. When you read the Bible and you read certain speeches from certain people, you definitely feel a spiritual inspiration behind it. And I encourage trying to identify that and find that. And, you know, the thing that really tipped me off on this whole topic was I was doing a deep dive search into the Bible, and I would get these ads. You know how the ads always chase your Google searches and it seems to magically know? I mean, sometimes it's like you search it once and then all of a sudden you're just blown up with stuff. It's just very strange. But what's been happening for me, I've been searching Bible, Bible, Bible. What keeps showing up on my feed, on my advertisements, is this website called Gaia.com, Gaia. And I'm like, I'm not searching for this. I'm just looking up Bible teachers and stuff. Why is this showing up on my feed? Weeks later, I decide to click it, and it says, ancient wisdom from the past, the history books never taught you before. And it says, new DNA evidence found. And this is the realm of the consciousness. And this is the wavelength that your brain goes into when you meditate. And something felt deeply off to me, because when you do compare it to the Bible, there's something very big missing, and that is the heart. There was no heart in any of this ancient wisdom. There was no heart in any of this newfound science. It was very dry. And so I thought, you know, you guys can go Google and I can go Google and we can find more about the scientific areas of spirituality than we would ever be able to cover here. But what we can cover now is how to draw out something from the Word or something from our prayers or something from our life experience and turn it into real lessons for the heart. And I think this is one of the biggest lessons Jesus taught on a very subtle level. And actually, it's funny that this, perfect timing, that this announcement came that we're about to celebrate the cosmic Sabbath, because I was going to talk about the Sabbath today. There's one idea called the Sabbath. Oh, nice. A voiceover. Who's doing that? Cool. So you can chime in. Nice. Was that Thomas? No, that wasn't Thomas. It would have been okay if it was Thomas. So yeah, been diving deep into this, the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. Now, one of our basic commandments in the 10 Commandments is honor the Sabbath. But today, we don't really do that, right? A lot of Christians don't. We don't. Unificationists don't really do it the old school way. We might go to church, but we kind of do our regular things. For me, I work a lot. Sometimes I work all through the week. It doesn't really matter. So I was really noticing how in the stories where Jesus is getting persecuted about what he's doing on the Sabbath, I'm sure you guys know these stories. He healed people on the Sabbath. And they said, "You're breaking the law." And they kept following him, and they kept pestering him about it. And finally, he caught them in a riddle. You probably know this one. He said, "Okay, so you're saying I can't heal people on the Sabbath, or I can't do things, but if you were walking along on a trail on the Sabbath and your animal or your oxen fell into a ditch, wouldn't you be working pretty hard to pull that thing out? Wouldn't you? For an animal? So what about then for saving a soul of a human being?" And that was his retort, and they did not like it. They did not like it. That was I keep saying this, snarky. That was snarky. He caught them. So you'd rather treat your animal nicely, but not the guy on the street. And so we know what they did? They upped the ante. They followed him around just to catch him doing something on the Sabbath again. There's a little passage, it's very subtle, but it said they were there, Pharisees were there at the temple so that they could see Jesus doing something on the Sabbath. They intended it. It was planned. They were going to go to this location and wait. So technically, they're not breaking a law, right? They're just probably resting on the Sabbath as they should. They're just standing around at this area, waiting for Jesus to come in. He does. And they're like, pretending to whistle or hide behind a newspaper. And just like, okay, what's he doing? And Jesus knows this, and he says to a man that's very afflicted, he said, "Stand forth and get your healing," essentially. And one teacher I was listening to said that was very notable because he could have been sneaky about it, trying to do it away from the Pharisees. He didn't care. He just said, "Stand forth, let's do it right here in the middle." And these guys had a fit. Now, I want to pause on this story because there's an interesting passage. It's, 2 Corinthians 3:6. And Paul is saying that the letter killeth, but the Spirit giveth life. The letter killeth, but the Spirit giveth life. Which feels a little contradictory almost because you're told to read and pray. So why does the letter killeth, right? But I think he might have been thinking about this exact story. According to the letter of the law, Jesus was 100% in the wrong to do these things on the Sabbath. And the Pharisee sitting there whistling, doing nothing, waiting to accuse Jesus of something, was, according to the paper, the letter version, he was right. He was sanctioned to do that. But if you were to put on what I was thinking of this morning as heart ray vision, you have X-ray, you have ultrasound, you have wavelengths that you can see something deeper than the picture, right? Deeper than what appears before the eye. Well, if you had a heart ray vision and you could see the wavelength and the color or the shape of the heart, you would see that the Pharisee was actually spiritually dead. He was following the letter, but he was spiritually dead. He was there just to accuse somebody of wrongdoing. That's not very spiritually enlightened, I would say. It's not loving. And he was doing that in the name of the Sabbath, no less. And then spiritually, heart-wise, Jesus was there to heal someone. It's the perfect illustration of the letter killeth and the Spirit giveth life. Jesus was giving life to somebody, and the guy following the letter of the law was spiritually dead. It's a perfect example. And I read something in the Divine Principle that I kind of in a murky way am recalling. God's love is stronger than God's principle. And I heard it again as a quote that Reverend Moon told a fellow prisoner who was of a different faith. believe Muslim. And he said, just remember, God's love is stronger than God's truth. So if you have God's truth, if you have the full, perfected God's truth, but you don't have God's love, you're missing the point. You're missing it. You're missing the mark. And actually, the more truth you learn, sadly, it can almost become like a sharpened weapon that you use, and you might cut people down with it. Your truth can actually sour your heart if you don't watch it carefully. You can become pretty arrogant. And I think as a younger person, I leaned into that category a little bit. You know, you grow up with all this knowledge or all this kind of understanding about the nature of God, and you look at the secular people, they don't know anything. And it's easy to let it sour your heart without you even knowing. And what I realized this week, thinking about all this, was we have to put God's love first, then God's truth. It's great to pursue truth. It's great. But these days, with all the denominations going on, it's like people are nitpicking over every little dot, and they're nitpicking over every little, in one speech, so-and-so said this, and then that, and 50 years earlier they said the opposite. They must be this and that. Sure, okay, you're building a case like a lawyer, fine, but where's God's love? Personally, I want to study and practice the theology that helps me love better. That's what I want. If I'm studying a theology or a religion that makes me love worse, I'm going to get out. I'm going to get out of there. If I'm growing, if I have more patience for people that I didn't used to have patience for, and I have more love for people, then I can say that I'm doing something. There's something here that's making me better. So, something to think about. Another, something that jumped out to me today was Jesus preached a lot, but he also healed a lot. So with his preaching came action. It wasn't just preaching. So just in Jesus alone is the example of somebody who wanted to put into action living. And that's why I love about the slogan, living for the sake of others. It kind of puts at the center of your creed an action for people, not just a theology. Not just a theology. I think living for the sake of others might be one of my favorite all time. That is such a perfect, beautiful slogan for how to implement a new type of heart learning in the world. So I want to just leave you with that today. I want to encourage you all to study as much as you can. Pray a little more, study a little more, but always translate it back to action. Let the words and your prayers go into your heart. Don't let your truth sour you, which is possible, and it happens a lot. Also, I really do believe that we can all be healers, just like Jesus. I think one of the big new kind of, this is the feeling I have. I'm just inserting my own thoughts here. But one of the next kind of waves that the world really needs is healing. Healing yourself and healing others if you can, or helping them too. You know, I'm going to go off the page just a little bit to share one thing I found this week, which is that parable about the plank in the eye. Everybody knows this one, right? Why are you picking the speck in your brother's eye when you have a plank in your own? And everybody thinks, oh, that's just a cheesy little parable to teach you not to be a hypocrite. Wrong. If you read the whole thing clearly, that's my homework assignment for you. I was telling Casey, I'm going to have like a sermon that goes for 2 or 3 weeks, and it's like one sermon, but it's 2 or 3 weeks long. Is that okay? And she's like, yes, it's okay, but have people do homework or something. I'm like, okay. Here's the homework. I want you to read that parable and meditate on parts of the parable you never hear. It says, why are you picking out the speck in your own eye when you can't, I'm paraphrasing here, when you can't see clearly? First, remove the plank from your eye so that you can see clearly and help your brother with the speck in his eye. That's a whole different feeling. So he brought it back to action, not just a state of passive, oh, let me be holy, or let me be non-hypocritical, that will make me go to heaven, right? I'll just not be a hypocrite. It was actually very action-based. It was, let me clear up my own junk so that I can help you better. It's like, how am I going to help you lose 5 pounds when I can't lose the 100 pounds I need to lose, right? That's kind of what he's saying. So the goal is not just lose 100 pounds, be thin, and you're good. The goal is figure out what the demons are, figure out what's blocking your progress, figure it out, make the progress, then help your, let's say your wife lose 5 pounds, because that's all she needs, right? You get the idea, right? It's based on action. It's based on living for the sake of others. That's the key. So I want the little homework is read that passage a few times and see if that emphasis can do something for you. We shouldn't focus on just not being hypocrites. That is such a low aim in life. That's not very active. We want to have a positive impact on people. We want to be able to love people more. And I just want you to go home with thinking that there is a difference between the spirit of a law and the letter of a law. And next week, I want to share with you the few things I've picked up on how to learn purely on a heart level, not a brain level, just a heart level. It's just a couple things I know. There's probably many more. But I'll share all that with you next week. And thank you very much.